So yeah, like the first question I always ask, it's kind of cliche, but it's just you know, why did you decide to trust a random stranger on the internet to, fix things?
Yeah, it's funny that we're actually talking because it seems like I'm just on another YouTube video.
Okay, cool.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's strange when, ironically enough, when you're going through these stages, like when me and my wife were kind of having problems, Instagram immediately started sending me all the reels of, like, dating advice and all this other stuff, um, which is kind of helpful, honestly. So I can't be mad at Instagram for doing that. But yeah, so I would just get a ton of different, clips and reels, some advice that I immediately was like, that's not it. And then I think I just saw, a lot of your videos and resonated. And then it didn't really take me a whole lot of research or anything like that to really kind of dive in. I was, once things started to take a turn for the worse, I was like, I reached out to a couple different therapists in West Palm Beach, and nobody really got back to me. So when I reached out to your team, they immediately got back to me. Um, and I was, a couple people that I talked to initially, and then diving more into your content and just kind of seeing a lot of the things that you were saying were exactly kind of my issues and what I was going through. So that's kind of why I initially thought, like, this will work out. Just really just the quality and the solutions that I had seen coming from you made the most sense to me. And it kind of seemed like I was in a position, even if it wasn't exactly, it was pretty close in most cases. So
Yeah. What,
um,
what happened within the context of the relationship that caused you to even search for help in the first place? What was going on?
yeah, because I've never done any type of therapy or anything like that before, and really in our relationship, we'd had arguments and whatnot, but 90+% of the time, I would say that both of us were happy. And so I think it was really after, we had been having kind of conversations about the issues that we had for about 2 weeks. And it was just getting worse, even though I was, doing everything that I could to make things better. And I was getting a lot of bad advice from, family members and friends and stuff like that. And it wasn't until, I don't think it was until maybe like a couple days prior to her actually leaving, um, did I reach out and schedule a call and stuff like that. So it wasn't until I knew that her actually leaving was a possibility. Um, but it all happened so fast. So I didn't really sit on my hands too much because it all kind of happened within maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So
As it usually does, right? But under the surface, she's been thinking about it for a while, right? What's been going on, and it kind of catches most guys off guard in a lot of ways when it kind of happens like that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So let's jump forward. So how long ago did you join the program?
Um, Man, I want to say all in maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, maybe.
Oh wow, so like 7, 8 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
And how are things now? What's been going on?
Well, yeah, I mean, she was, well, to answer your first question immediately, she's back in the condo that we live together. She moved out like in the middle of the day when I was working. So on Friday after work, came home to nothing. And then fast forward like 3 weeks later, and a bunch of money that I have given her to, like, basically establish a new life. She broke the lease where she was at and is completely moved back in. So things changed really quickly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, like, man, so okay, let's break that down because it's like it sounds almost like a miracle, but there's things that you've done along the way to get that, right? So, what would you say was the first big change in yourself that allowed her to see the change and trust you?
Um, I mean, I think, like with anything, realizing that the problems that were going on were not only my responsibility, but also they were bigger than even what maybe she let on.
Yeah,
Um, and that was one of the issues, is that whenever she would bring something to my attention, I would think it's like, this is so trivial. Like, why are you even talking about this? And I would typically just be dismissive of it, and then more often than not, just tell her like, just do this instead, or like, I'll do this instead. Um, and that was just kind of how my mind thought that that's how I understand. That's how I show understanding is by trying to like, make it seem less of a problem.
Right.
So yeah, that was the first thing for me was just understanding that I was doing a lot of things incorrectly, um, and just kind of accepting that was the first step for me.
Yeah, so like we talk about that a lot in the program about like having that ego, right? Where it's like getting defensive, being reactive, right? And putting the blame outside of yourself. That's like that victim paradigm. And then the other side, the apex is right. It's like, okay, maybe it's just something she's saying here, even if it's not delivered with some sugar, if there's some truth in it, right? And like being able to like take that and see what she's trying to say to how she wants to change you for the positive because she wants to connect with you, even though it's a criticism. That's like step number one is recognizing, like putting your ego aside. Being like, okay, there is something here in her complaints and her pulling away and what she's saying that I can listen to. Maybe look at myself in the mirror and say, what is it that caused her to, push her away? Um,
Right, right.
and so can you think of like maybe one that's a little bit more specific around what's one thing she said that she would point out to you that you were like, oh, okay, I see what she's saying.
Hmm. Coming to specifics. I mean, we would have. I have a 5-year-old stepdaughter, and it's always been kind of a point of issue, just having differences of opinions on, raising her and whatnot. And it's a dynamic that's kind of difficult to maneuver from time to time because she wants to kind of take the lead on some things, and I'm used to taking the lead on pretty much everything. So it was not easy for me to like relinquish that. Um, so and like for the longest time, I was just like, well, we were trying to have more kids. So I was like, well, if we have more kids, we can't have like these two different kind of parenting styles. And those were just conversations. So something like that specifically, I'm not sure if I'm giving you, if we're looking for something maybe a little bit different or.
No, yeah, I mean, there's loads of issues that every guy struggles with, right? But like for you guys, that was the parenting is definitely a common thread of something, right? Especially when it comes to like stepchild, right? It's like interesting and it's a little bit different with like where's my role in this? What's the boundaries around that? And I think if you look at like we always talk about that tree. Remember the tree analogy? I'm not sure if you saw that one where we talk about the branches. There's like finances, sex, kids, but deep down there's like the core root issues. So that's like expressing boundaries, like communication style, values. So underneath that with the kid is like boundaries, right? And how to express boundaries. Would you agree that's something that was like hard for you guys to navigate in conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I think that regardless of what it was, if I didn't understand the meaning for her emotions, I wouldn't I wouldn't do anything to make her feel validated in that. Um, so and then yeah, there's a bunch of kind of other smaller things, most of them having to do with me not, opening up about really much. I had always just kind of either taught or like subconsciously trained that if I had any problems or if I was going through anything, that it was best to just keep it to myself, and then work through it in due time, type of thing. And when those things started to come up, she just felt like I was hiding a lot of things from her, and that's what kind of led her to think like, oh well, I married somebody that I didn't really fully understand or know. Um, so that was probably like the biggest thing that we struggled with. So just kind of realizing that and why I do those things, or why I feel like I can't express those kind of emotions and past traumas with her was something that I didn't even think that I would have to work on, let alone it was something that was a big issue in our relationship. So
Yeah, that's massive, and when a lot of women say to the husbands, you're being controlling, and the guy's like, I'm not trying to control you at all. What she means with that situation right there is like when you hide parts of yourself, she sees that as controlling because you're trying to manipulate the way that she sees you, right? For a woman, that is controlling because you're censoring yourself, right? And so in those moments now, when you're able to recognize that culture, which is like it starts to come up, you're like, oh, I don't want to share this with her. How are you able to like overcome that? What does the conversation look like differently now?
Yeah, I think just knowing that it's easier to kind of be honest about those things was the biggest thing. And then also just in the past, what I would do is whatever came to my mind, I would just whatever frustrations would come to my mind, I would just tell her like, this is how I'm feeling about this situation, but wouldn't get into like the deeper kind of stuff.
Right.
Now I just feel like I'm hurting myself if I don't bring these situations up, or I'm hurting myself. And then obviously I have to think about, how am I going to express this in a way that doesn't, put the blame on her. So just constantly thinking like, all right, when I bring this to her, how can I validate her emotions and not try to, make her feel a certain way. And that's my biggest problem in the past was I would just wanted her to feel good about the situation. And I think the thing that sat with me the most is I forget which portion of the course I was going over, but just allowing yourself to sit in those negative emotions with her really helped kind of a lot of our reconciliation conversations. And um, yeah, it was she, said that she felt like she was talking to, a different person, or a lot of these things that I wasn't expecting her to say, because in our relationship, because things had been going well for so long, I thought that I was, an emotionally intelligent guy, but I just wasn't like implementing any of these things. I wasn't, what's the term I think you use, emotionally, not emotionally intelligent, but um maybe you can use the words that I'm looking for.
Emotionally competent, I think is maybe the word I
Yeah,
use.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I was watching. I saw a video on that the other day, and I was like, finally, someone gets it because someone else echoed what I said, which is someone in the audience was like, I feel like I'm emotionally intelligent, and the person on stage was like, you probably are for yourself, but I think emotional, for me, I call emotional competence is understanding your emotions is one thing, but then acting congruently through them, right? The idea of congruence, which is like you have your experience of emotions. Do you honestly express that and do you have action through it? So it's like a clear through line versus like, oh, I feel jealous or insecure or envious, but I'm not going to show her that because I don't want to seem weak. That's incongruent, which is actually not manly, right? Which is not apex. And then the
Right,
idea is
right.
also understanding her emotions. And so, like, the biggest hang up for a lot of guys is that when their wives are shutting down or she's saying, like, I don't want love you anymore, like, and she's all angry, right? They don't see that she's actually hurt and she doesn't mean those things. And so they're responding to the words she's saying, which is like that logical paradigm. And you also touched on it too. This is the biggest thing, Colt, which is huge for guys to get. Which I love that you brought up, which is the idea that when she's upset, you want to make her happy. Of course you do. You're on cloud nine when she's happy. Like life is good, but for her, for a woman who loves to experience a range of emotions, when she's going through that, she wants to feel that emotion. So allowing her to feel it, because when you try to make her feel better, she's like, oh, he doesn't want me to be the way I am, right? That's one of the biggest.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's still stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of where the stage I am now is. I still have to remind myself of these things, because even though I'm out of the doghouse and the situations aren't as kind of tense, where it's not always in front of mind, as because anytime we had a conversation in the past, I was like, all my kind of training was right there. But now as things have gotten better, that's just as much of a kind of an important stage as keeping all of that, somewhere that's readily available, and just being able to notice that stuff. Um, because we even, in the past couple of weeks where she's been back home, we've had not arguments, but like maybe kind of little things where it was like, it could have turned into an argument. Um, and then I just kind of remained calm. And where in the past I would just like anything that annoyed me, I would just, I wouldn't get upset or anything like that, but I would be very vocal. And my wife would take that as like, he's just beating me down with like things that I'm not doing correctly. Um, and me, I'm just thinking like, oh no, I'm just telling you, this is, how I feel about the situation. So just knowing what time to come to that. And then, if I have issues, I, stop sending texts about things. And, you know, if I do feel something, just put it on pause. And then a day later, I probably won't even feel the same thing and I'll just not even bring it up type of thing. So that's kind of, just been something that I've still had to kind of work through is, keeping these moments in time at front of mind and, being able to go back and remember what it is that I was doing, to get things on the right place and just keep them there. So,
Yeah, man. And one of the things that once you get this idea down of that every complaint she has, every disconnect she feels with you, it all stems back to her not feeling safe emotionally, right? If you look at like, oh, you're not making decisions, you're not leading, she doesn't feel safe with that. You're being inconsistent with your word and your action. Oh, she can't trust that, right? You're whatever it is, or you're being reactive to her, you're blowing up. She doesn't feel safe with you. She's expressing her emotions, but you're trying to get rid of her emotions. If you tie it all back to like she needs to feel safe, her heart needs to feel protected, and like you are the man that's going to keep her safe and protected, so she can lean into you. If like you always operate from that like perspective that everything you do is just try to make her feel safe, it's like you can't go wrong with that, right?
yeah,
And the biggest thing about that, before I let you chime in, is we tie it back to ego now. Is like ego is like I'm going to focus on my own needs. Like she's upsetting me. Oh, she's attacking me. Me. If you put all your attention like I'm going to make sure she feels good, and you're like thinking about her emotions, it like almost auto corrects.
yeah, yeah. Um, and then just honestly being, I'm in a field and, I kind of live a life where being humble is not really rewarded.
Okay.
Um,
Yep.
so just knowing kind of how to switch that off and, just remember that I'm still not always the person that is the most important in our relationship. Um, and that doesn't always mean, making every single sacrifice that needs to be made in the relationship, but um, just not viewing every situation as how is this affecting me above everyone else type of thing. Um, because I can tend to kind of devalue my wife in our relationship because, I primarily make most of the money. She stays home. She works from home. So there isn't a whole lot of financial burden or anything like that placed on her. But I kind of underestimated the amount of like emotional labor that I was putting her through. Um, Even though I was doing all these kind of, nice things that on the surface most men would view as, good things, or, most untrained men, I should say. Um, but yeah, that's really still stuff that I always have to keep in mind is just always keep my ego in check. Um, and then just continue to like work on myself continuously because um, when you don't have anybody else besides your wife to keep you accountable, um, you're only getting from her, and it's sometimes it's tough to like see what it is that she's trying to say. So just realizing those things was the biggest change is realizing those things for what they were. Now I don't really get upset when she says anything, or in the past if she said something that made me feel like unvalued. I would get defensive about it and be like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. And just understanding that she's saying this right now, but that's how she feels at this moment. That doesn't mean that that's how she truly feels. And my wife has made comments like, oh, and she like will write me letters and stuff like that, uh, where she'll just say like, I'm so excited how calm you've been throughout this whole situation, and I'm very glad that you continue to kind of fight for our relationship, and any number of different things like that. Just kind of even prove the point further is just a couple weeks ago, she was out the door, had her whole life kind of on a different um, schedule, and took a promotion and all these things to kind of prepare herself to live independently.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that's the that's how quickly things can change. So
Yeah, and for a lot of guys, it doesn't happen that quick, and there are differences between that. But I think she just needed to see some type of change. And one thing I talk about in the program that I know that you heard of, and I want to see how if this came up in your relationship with her in this journey, is her testing you, right? So like when she started to like let you come back, did she still test you a little bit? Like, oh, is he really changing? Like, did she do any tests?
yeah, I mean, I can think of something like, yeah, definitely. And it's, I have been like, I notice it too. And in the past, so the other day she's like, oh, can we, we go to church every Sunday, and she was asking me to like, one of these days, can we like read the Bible together after work or something like that? And I'm immediately thinking like, gosh, like I don't want to, like, you want me to spend more time with you than I'm already spending with you, because I've basically had to, put a lot of focus back on work. But instead of saying that, that's immediately what I was thinking. I was just like, okay, yeah, like knowing that when it comes down to it, we'll be able to, fit that in our schedule when it's convenient. But in the past, when she would request stuff like that, kind of knowing my schedule and whatnot, if anything did conflict with my schedule, I would immediately shut it down. Like, nope, I got to do this. So like prioritizing my work life. She's kind of tested me on that a couple times. She wasn't feeling that well this past week, and I asked her if she wanted me to come home early from work, and she said, "Yeah, it would be great if you could do that." So I came home early from work. Besides that, I mean, just kind of different tests about like talking about certain things, and I'm sure throughout the way, I might have failed, one or two of these kind of tests, but I mean, overall, because I've just kind of stayed on, the new kind of mission statement of, just being open and listening to her needs. That was the biggest thing, is when she would bring up concerns, just not taking it seriously and kind of downplaying the things. Because I would put it into like, well, if it's not really affecting me, how is it affecting you type of situation? And I would just put so much importance on myself, not knowingly. I mean, I thought I was giving myself the responsibility of, handling her problems. Um, and then also, I mean, I gave her, she wanted to, pick out the car that she got or whatever. So instead of kind of micromanaging that situation, I just gave her, the financial help that she needed to make that happen. Um, so yeah, I mean, I one of the biggest things too for me is I got really invested in like just doing kind of daily scripture readings and stuff like that. And a lot of these negative thoughts that I get throughout the day, I just kind of understood like these aren't things that are coming from me. Because if I could control them, I could just say, stop thinking this. So when I get these negative thoughts, I just kind of keep the trash in the trash can. Um, and that's helped out a lot. So oftentimes, if and especially with my wife coming back now, that's another thing that I've talked to with Chris and Mark about, is like just making sure that I'm not allowing resentment to come back into place, because that was like the first week back. That was a lot of the emotions that I was feeling, was like, man, she really messed me up financially. I'm gonna have to work, super hard during the holidays to get back on track. And these are thoughts that are going into my head. And, Mark and Chris had to kind of remind me, like, if you knew where you were at, 2 weeks ago, you would not be, you would not be feeling these thoughts. You would be excited about it. But now that you have her, have her back, um, you're kind of, going back to, what could I have done differently to stop it? And this happened for a reason, type of thing. And although it was super painful in the beginning and in the middle, and it's something that definitely set me up for a lot of success down the road. And one of the things that Mark was telling me too is like, I understand that you had to go through a lot, but if this was something that will allow you to keep the relationship you have and the marriage that you have in place for the next 20, 30, 40 years, it'll all be worth it in the end. And I 100% agree. It's some, I'll be able to get everything back in place within a month or two. So that time, I can't get back that time, if things are gone forever in terms of our relationship, but I can always get that money back. I can always, kind of get back, whatever time lost from work. So,
Yeah, in regards to having that resentment, that's a huge component there. That's why the forgiveness module is so early in the program, because that will self-sabotage a lot of men where they'll have progress with their wife and then they'll that pain and resentment will come out and they'll do things to just push her away. And it's like, oh crap, right? And so when it comes to those negative thought patterns, culture, I think the biggest thing for me that helps men a lot is number one is don't deny that those are there. Like definitely recognize and say, okay, like almost like there's like two people inside of you, right? Like have a conversation with that resentment. Like, okay, what's going on? Like, why are you resentful? Because she didn't know this and this. Okay, cool. Like, hear it out, right? It's like, and it's usually like a younger version of yourself, like a child version, and listen to him, right? Because like, if you suppress that person, he's going to get louder and louder. So once you do that, and then the second thing you did, which I love how that Chris and Mark helped you, is like the perspective shift, right? Which is like, okay, I mean, you laid out the perspective perfectly, but one perspective that I like is like you just ask yourself, are these thoughts serving me for the man I want to be and what I want in my life? It's like, no, right? If you really think about it, you want to be happy with her. And so holding on to that resentment is going to push her away. You're going to be more dismissive. She's going to feel it. And it's going to go back into the same cycle. So, yeah, for me, it's like recognizing where they come from, having that conversation, and then just having that perspective shift. And that's how you were able to like overcome that.
yeah. Yeah. And then honestly, too, I mean, just forgiveness, when things switched so quickly and it went in such a 180 that when my wife started moving back things into the house, all of the accountability went from kind of my issues to her taking full responsibility for her issues. And to the point where now we were having conversations about like, okay, how are we going to get through all of the past traumas that you haven't kind of gotten through that kind of led you to the point where leaving was the best option for you type of thing in your mind. And when it did shift, I was immediately like, man, why did this have to happen type of thing after I succeeded. Um, and then just understanding like you're what, I made a commitment to her and I made a commitment to myself to, maintain this marriage forever. And that forgiveness is going to be not only something that she because I was the person that was asking for forgiveness throughout this period. And when things came back, I was like, man, now I got to do that part as well myself. And these things only lasted maybe a day or two, and then I quickly kind of
Yeah,
reframed and was like, it is what it is. A couple days they went by. So
cool. Coulter, man, like one last question. The last question I like to ask guys before we wrap up is, if you can go back in a time machine, 6 months ago, and that you could talk to yourself and tell yourself something you needed to hear, what would you have to tell him?
oh man, I would probably have just told myself to to reach out for some relationship counseling earlier, um or just kind of, if you just remove getting help from someone else, if I could just be there to talk to myself about this, would just be like listen to understand. Um and if I couldn't avoid this situation, one of the best kind of pieces of advice that I got was thinking that, you know, in a relationship, you need two parties to stay committed for it to work. And I've just kind of proven that you only need one party to make things work. You only need one party. There might be a time, down the road where my wife needs to be that person. But no matter how difficult it gets, if you stay locked in on, fixing the things that you need to fix and you're going to be in control of a lot more things than you think you are. So that was a huge piece of advice, that I would have told myself, is like, you can control a lot of these things that come up. Um, and then honestly, just kind of um, being more active in the moment of listening to understand, and just reflecting how she's feeling was so big for us. I didn't, and then another thing too is like understanding that what she's saying to me is not how she truly feels. What she's saying to me is how she might feel in that very moment,
Mm.
and that would really get to me, and that would kind of make me react. So best advice, don't be reactive. Understand that what she's saying in the moment is not exactly how she feels. Um, and then, when the worst case scenario comes up, you are in control of the destiny of your relationship, and it only takes one person to stay committed to it. And I'm glad things turned around quickly. But within the first couple weeks, like, I was just dedicated to making things work, and to kind of building myself up to a point. And really, it was at the time where I let go of the outcome and understood that regardless of the situation, things were going to be okay. And that was the most difficult part, was letting go of the anxiety, because it just made everything in my life more difficult, was being so anxious all the time. Um, so yeah, I think those are probably the three or four main talking points I would have given myself.
Man, that was so. We should have started with that question because that was solid, man. Good way to end. Good way to end it, though. And again, I appreciate you so much for trusting me, man, and going through the process to be a better man. And yeah, man, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to continue the journey. It's definitely going to be a little bit easier than it was for the past couple of months or so. Um, but that's the thing about starting this whole thing, is realizing that the mountaintop of getting married is just the beginning, and you have to constantly be working towards becoming better. And then each time you reach that new mountaintop, there's always things that are going to come up, and you always got to be on your heels, ready to go. So that's why I'm excited that I kind of locked in, and I got Mark and Chris to help me through things as time goes on. So
Beautiful. Yeah, staying tapped into the community and helping other men as well. Culture is going to keep you on your edge and not getting complacent, right? That's super important. But I appreciate you, man. Have a great rest of your weekend. And if you ever need anything, just reach out to me. Okay.
yeah, thanks, Josh. Appreciate it, man.
I take care. Bye.
You too, man.